Jiz, can you try to make me the host? Let's see.
Hold on, miss. Ayan. Okay, now nag-connect na siya. Oh my gosh. Sorry. Can you hear me, miss?
Yes, I can hear you. Sige, Jiz.
Sorry, I was wrong cause yung YouTube pala miss naka-public. So,
Ah,
I'm trying to oh my gosh. Sorry, my bad.
it's
Kanina ko lang
okay.
napansin na naka-public pala siya, so dapat unlisted. So, yeah, it works now.
Okay.
And
Wait lang. Sorry, I'm looking at the screen. Can we refresh? Parang nabura ata yung white background ng DSWD logo. Parang nagdoble siya.
I refreshed it already. Tapos ganun pa din, Wina.
Oh, really?
I'll try again.
Sige. Sige. Oh,
Is
no.
ganyan
Okay, wait.
ba?
Ang weird. Pero kapag hindi siya naka-present mode, it's okay, diba? I mean,
Kung itong slide, ito yung second slide. Do.
second slide.
Ah.
Pero, okay. Gusto mo i-delete na lang yung first slide?
Sige.
Sige. Kung ayaw niya.
Ayaw mo.
Ayaw niya mag-cooperate, i-delete natin siya. Okay, there. Okay.
Okay, so we are still in practice session. So in a few minutes, we will be broadcasting the webinar via our streaming service. So kindly please be ready. Mute your microphones by default, and only the speakers who will be giving the opening remarks and introductory remarks will be the one to turn on their cameras. So break a leg, everyone.
Thank you.
Miss Vina,
Yes?
not sure why, but yung nasa YouTube setup, hindi pa rin nag-blue yung go live. But if I go to the YouTube link itself, I can see na yung Zoom happenings.
Okay. I think okay na yun, Jiz. At least nakikita siya doon. I think that's okay. Can you send me the link sa chat para ma-check ko rin if
Kaso
nakikita
miss,
ko?
actually sa akin ko lang nakikita. Pero when you click on the link, it says waiting.
Oh, ang weird. Pero hindi pa nag-aano yung go live? Hindi mo pa siya
Hindi
maklik?
pa nagbo-blue.
So weird.
I know. Wait, hold on, let me share the link.
Okay.
There, I sent sa chat.
Oo, naka-waiting pa siya. Pero may mga people na do. Sige, wait lang. Jiz, if gawin mo akong host dito, baka makikita ko yung yung stream options. Can you try lang? May gawin akong host. If wala, ibalik ko sa'yo. Ayun, I can see it. Oh, pero naka-stop live stream na siya. Ang weird. Wait ha, tignan ko dito sa YouTube studio ko.
Hi team, it's already 9:01. Whenever you're ready.
Okay, Bea, we're just trying to fix yung Okay. Jiz, can you try to see if kita na tayo? Naka-open na siya sa akin, nakalagay dito end stream na.
Sorry, dun sa YouTube studio, miss mo, kita mo na
Ah,
end stream?
Oo, kita ko na end
Really?
Oo. Pa-check dun sa YouTube link if nag-aano na siya.
Team, can you check? Can you go? Kasi sa akin hindi pa rin naka-still pa rin yung ano eh, yung thumbnail. When I
Maybe,
open
Wina, you
it.
can share the link to me.
It's in the chat, Jerome.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Giselle sent it.
Test live.
It's still the thumbnail.
Still the thumbnail. So weird.
It's live. Nakalagay. I'm viewing it. It's live.
Can you see, Miss Amy, can you hear the things that we're saying now?
Hindi.
Hindi. Huh.
But 3 are watching now.
Okay, wait. Let me refresh just to see. Yeah, waiting pa rin siya. I don't know why, pero it says na that it's live.
Ang problem natin sa YouTube lang.
Yeah, sa YouTube lang, Michelle.
Oo, siguro we can proceed kahit na ang live natin nasa Facebook na lang.
Okay.
Tapos we'll just upload kung hindi talaga mag-pursue ngayon.
Okay, sige.
Hi, it's live actually. I can see the link.
Okay, Miss Amy, you can see yourself in the YouTube. Okay. Oh, there. I can hear it. Okay, so it's working. It's working.
Ang problem natin sa YouTube lang.
Yeah, sa YouTube lang.
Okay, baka nagkakaroon na ng delay or something.
Yeah.
Okay, let's let our attendees in. Miss Vina, you're the main host now.
Okay. I'll give it back to you, Jill.
Okay, so now we'll spotlight Miss Amy's video.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to ACDP's webinar on the support systems approach for persons who use drugs treatment, recovery, and care. We'll begin in a few minutes. In the meantime, please sit back and watch our video to learn a bit more about ACDP. Thank you. Good morning again and welcome once more to ACDP's webinar on the support systems approach for persons who use drugs, treatment, recovery, and care. Please join us as we open today's session with a prayer and the Philippine National Anthem.
Sikoy ko kami gimu tolangit Sikoy ko kami gimu taal dawoy bulan Ikaw ang nagbuhat sa kabituunan Ikaw ang nagbuhat sa kalibutan Manama, mawantog ka Warag po ko ilingkoy ko O Diyos, kahibulungan ka Busa ikaw lang ang simbahon ko Manama, mawantog ka Warag po ko ilingkoy ko O Diyos, kahibulungan ka Busa ikaw lang ang simbahon ko Busa ikaw lang ang alagaran ko
Thank you everyone for being here. Before we begin, may I remind the audience to please keep your videos off and your microphones muted so as not to interrupt the flow of the program. We encourage everyone to leave comments in the chat on Zoom or in the comments on YouTube. Please also do leave your questions in the Q&A tab or the comment section so that our team can see them and gather them for the discussion later on in the webinar. Everyone is encouraged to stay until the end of the webinar as we will be giving the link to the evaluation form, which is a requirement to claim your e-certificate for this session. Now it's my pleasure to introduce one of ACDP's partners who will be introducing our speakers and moderating for the first part of our webinar. Please welcome Professor Amy Rose Manda, faculty member of the Psychology Program and extensionist of the Graduate School of Polytechnic University of the Philippines. Miss Amy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lina, for that introduction. Good morning, everyone who are watching us here today. Again, I'm Miss Amy Rose Arguelles Manda from the Polytechnic University of the Philippines. Welcome to today's webinar. I'd like to kick off our session by acknowledging our wide audience that's gathered here today. We have representatives from the private sector, the academe, and government bodies such as Department of Health, Department of Interior and Local Government, the Department of Social Welfare and Development, the Professional Regulation Commission, and the various LGUs and anti-drug abuse offices, as well as representatives from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. Welcome and thank you for being here with us and our ACDP partners today. One of ACDP's priorities as research consortium is to focus on creating an environment that's inclusive to research and frameworks within the policy, practice, and governance spheres of substance use. Today, we're going to be honing on in support systems for persons who use drugs. This is a vast area of field with numerous frameworks and approaches. In particular, we'll be looking at treatment, recovery, and care specifically applied to the LGU setting. To give today's opening remarks, please allow me to introduce the Undersecretary for Policy and Plans of the Department of Social Welfare and Development, Undersecretary Jose Antonio R. Hernandez.
Hello, Miss Amy. Good morning.
Hi.
Hello. I just received a message from the office of Yusek Hernandez. He's attending currently to an emergency. So he's sending his apologies, but in behalf of the DSWD of the Department of Social Welfare and Development, he is extending his commendation to the Asian Center for Drug Policy for organizing this very relevant webinar. And in behalf of the DSWD, he is sending his assurance that DSWD as a national government agency is committed to provide its and perform its role along technical assistance and resource augmentation to all our stakeholders, especially the local government units. Good day, and please enjoy the webinar.
Oh, thank you very much, Ms. Noli Belin, for delivering the message of Yusek Hernandez. We know that in the government, talagang medyo busy tayong lahat and minsan may mga emergency commitments. But still, he made time to send the message, so we appreciate it. So thank you again, Yusek Hernandez, through sending your message to Ms. Noli Belin of DSWD as well. Okay, so moving on. So ganyan talaga pag live, no? we will have to adjust. But that is still an inspiring message, and hearing the commitment of DSWD in contributing and also helping us with today's webinar. Okay, so before we introduce our first speaker for today's session, I'd like to remind everyone, as Ms. Rina mentioned earlier, the audience are free to please post your questions in the Q&A and chat box for our Zoom participants. For those who are joining us live in YouTube and in Facebook, you may also put your questions and comments in the chat box. We will read and respond to your questions and comments during the latter part of our webinar. So thank you very much. Moving on, our first speaker will be discussing the role of support systems in the treatment and care of people who use drugs and their families. It is my pleasure to introduce Ms. Karen Peters, the Regional Drugs and Health Program Officer of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. Ms. Peters, welcome.
Good morning. It's a privilege to be with you this morning to share some insights on the role of support systems in the treatment and care of people who use drugs and their families. Firstly, I wish to thank the Asian Center for Drug Policy for inviting UNODC to be part of this program. I would also like to send regards and thanks to Undersecretary Jose Antonio Hernandez for opening this event. I'm going to start us off by overviewing what do we mean by treatment and care when we're speaking specifically around people who use drugs and their families. And then we will go into a little bit of detail around support systems. I know my colleague, Mr. Cristobal, is going to be a lot more in detail in his presentation around what these support systems could look like. So this session is really to provide you a bit of context and a bit of overview. When we're speaking about treatment and care, I like to bring up this pyramid because it really provides a little bit of detail around what some of these treatment and care services are. Very often around drug dependence, people default to understanding treatment to be detoxification or in residential rehabilitation, or send the kid to a rehab. It's not that straightforward. We consider drug dependence to be a multifactorial health disorder that is chronic, and it is relapsing and remitting in nature, which means that a person with a drug use disorder might need to access treatment services over the course of their lifetime, say at several stages. Okay. The other element of drug use that we need to understand is that really there are a lot of services that can be administered at the informal level, and we'll talk a little bit about what some of these services are. But for the vast majority of people who use drugs, there is an element of self-care that goes into treatment and care, right? When we're talking about treatment and care, this would be the care part, okay? Self-care would encompass services that we know as harm reduction or harm minimization, okay? So these ways in which the person can safely use a substance and ensure that their health and well-being is taken care of. And really, for the vast majority of people who have ever used drugs, there is an element of self-care that that individuals are able to, implement. That being said, it's important also to understand that self-care is a good opportunity because I'd mentioned earlier harm reduction. It's a good opportunity to make sure that people who are engaging in drug use are informed around what some of the complications related to their drug use might be. Okay, so for example, and this is just one example, if a person is using stimulant drugs, there is a risk of dehydration, and an element of self-care could be, for example, ensuring that the person has access to water or rehydration minerals. Before we progress, just to highlight that the higher up the services pyramid a person progresses, the higher the cost of those services are. Okay, so long-stay residential services, which means keeping people inside treatment facilities, really are costly to the state, to the family, whoever's paying for those services for the individual. That's also to say that there is a lower need for people to enter into long-stay residential services. And at this point, I just want to remind us of our understanding that there's a difference between drug use and drug dependence, okay? And for the vast majority of people who have ever used drugs, They might never develop a drug use disorder, and they most likely would not need any type of medical intervention. Okay. So breaking down a little bit further what some of these system level services are. And at this point, I just want to highlight when we say system level, we're talking about the healthcare system. Okay. It's not the system that we're talking about in relation to the topic of this event, which are support systems. Okay, so in terms of the healthcare system, for informal community care, this can encompass outreach interventions, self-help groups, and recovery management, informal support through family and friends. And self-help groups in the context of the Philippines, for example, might include Narcotics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous, or any type of these, support-based interventions. This is an important point that I wish to make as well. We mentioned the pyramid, the services pyramid. An individual does not start at one level and progress through the services pyramid, although that might be the case. The pyramid itself is designed for a health system understanding that there should be access to at the broadest sort of level of the services pyramid. There should be a greater access to these services and a greater availability of these services. And as you go up, the services can decrease in quantity because the need decreases in quantity. So therefore, at the informal community care level, we really should be looking at how we can strengthen and support these outreach interventions and self-help groups, because a person that have gone or have used the services at the top of the pyramid, right, the residential treatment services, might at some stage revert to using informal community care for their maintenance. And I'm sure the other speakers will talk a little bit further about this. And other types of services, for example, at the primary healthcare level, might be screening and brief interventions, basic health services, first aid, wound management, okay? A little bit basic services that a person cannot just access at home, right? Generic social welfare services might include housing and shelter and food, unconditional social support, and the specialized treatment services. This is now we're going a little further up the pyramid, right? So we're talking about a fewer number of services that might need to be available. Treatment planning, case management, detoxification and withdrawal management if a person decides that that's what they want to go through, medication-assisted treatment, relapse prevention. So these are, again, they should be available, but they should be made available at a smaller quantity than what we're talking about when we're mentioning informal community care. Lastly, and I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this, but at the top of the pyramid, we're looking at specialized healthcare services, so interventions by specialists in mental health, for example. Also, specialized social welfare services might include vocational training or education programs, for example, or recovery management services. And at the top end of the pyramid, the long-term residential services might include a residential program to address severe or complex drug use disorders and comorbid conditions. So in the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about these support systems, okay, or systems in general. And I'm going to overview a few of the systems theories that we refer to within UNODC when we're talking about, what a service system should consist of. I want to take a step back or zoom right back, to look at the biggest system of them all, which is our galaxy, and how even at the sort of extreme macro level, we are all interrelated and interconnected, the stars and the planets and the galaxies, and our galaxy is just one of about 51 and about 100 billion in terms of, the entire universe or observable universe, so to say. So there is really an element for us to understand that we are part of something way bigger, okay? And as human beings, we exist in relation to each other, okay? And this is why support systems are really that important. There's a model that is commonly referred to in health promotion, and it's called the social ecological model. And it helps us to understand individuals being viewed as nested within a complex and interconnected system, okay, that encompasses the individual, their family, their peers, their schools, their neighborhoods, their society at large, the country, okay, and maybe even the region. There might even be a regional influence or identity in relation to the individual. Okay, so when we were thinking just now about the entire galaxy and the entire universe, we often, we understand things only from our individual perspective. But in a way, we are connected to that through our social connections, through our community connections, through our societal connections, our national connections, our regional connections, our world connections, right? So all of these sort of spheres of influence, so to say, have an impact on the behavior, on our behavior. And our behavior is seen as the product of the interplay between ourselves as an individual and the systems, okay? So the family is a system, the community as a system, the society as a system, okay? And so it's important at this stage, to really conceptualize what influence does the family have? What influence does the family have on the individual? Because they are part of the most immediate social system or social factors that a person engages with, at least the family of origin, so the family that the person was born into. Sure, you've seen some of these pictures and kids drawings, draw your family, describe what your family is like. That's really important from a psychological perspective for people to understand, because the family systems theory considers the bidirectional influence, okay, the influence that parents and children from a family system perspective have on each other. Okay, so family theory doesn't look at the person as a complete system in themselves, although that can be, it can be observed and understood. Family systems theory suggests that substance use and related problem behaviors are influenced by interactive processes within the family system, okay, and that every family member influences and is influenced by the other family members. Okay, I'm sure you've heard quite often a person saying, "Oh, I am a middle child." Yeah. So how we behave as a middle child, or I'm a firstborn, how we behave as a firstborn has an influence on how others in the family relate to us and how we relate to others in the family, or how we influence them, or how they and how they influence us. Okay, so when we're talking really about support systems, it's good for us to understand them through these spheres of influence. It might help to understand them from that perspective, and that at each level of a person's recovery or treatment and care, there is a role that that the family, the peers, the community, and possibly even the society have to play in ensuring that the person recovers as a holistic and whole human being. To wrap up, I'm just going to share 3 very important documents that I used or that I drew on to share this information with you, and which I really recommend you to go out and read. The first is the standards, okay, the international standards on the treatment of drug use disorders. The second is a training manual, and I guess you wouldn't be able to access this in the open, but you can communicate with me, and we can arrange a way for you to have that information. And this training manual is designed as part of the TreatNet, a group of tools around the elements of family therapy for adolescents with substance use disorder. And lastly, the guidance for community-based treatment and care services for people affected by drug use and dependence, because this guidance document really specifically looks at what systems within our region of Southeast Asia are available, accessible, and affordable for people who use drugs. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. I really hope that you took something out of it, but if you did not, or if you have any questions, let's discuss it in the Q&A section, or feel free to contact me on email. I do respond to emails when they come through. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miss Karen Peters, for that. I guess our participants right now who are watching have a wider view of how to look at the support systems. So malamang those who are already involved when it comes to treatment, recovery, and care are now checking out on their programs, which areas they think that they need to improve on or add on coming from what they heard from you. So indeed, it was a very insightful presentation. Again, thank you, Ms. Karen Peters. So once more, if the audience have questions for Ms. Peters, you can, and I can see that there are individuals here who have questions already. Please feel free to type in your questions in the chat box, and we will answer that later on, and we will discuss that after all of our speakers have presented their own presentation. As well as I have seen that there are people who are having trouble hearing our presentation. If you are using tab, yung pong mga naka-cellphone or tablet, please check your audio. Check on the, merong icon dyan ng speaker. Pwede nyo i-turn on. Okay? So thank you very much. Our next speaker is here to present his experience running peer recovery support with the Baguio Emergency Response to Addiction, otherwise known as BERA. I am pleased to introduce Mr. Clemente Junjun Abela, the Program Director of Serenity in the Steps and CPDAP training provider and master trainer. He is also a PRC CPD provider and UNODC Drug Demand Reduction UTC master trainer. Let us all welcome Mr. Abela. Sir Junjun.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank Asia Center for Drug Policy for hosting this event. This advocacy is a very admirable initiative towards reducing the stigma and advancing and helping the law catch up with the body of science that has been quite a challenge in this war on drugs, or I would rather prefer to call it war on addiction. For my part this morning, I'd like to share with you my experience with BERA. No? BERA is an acronym for Baguio Emergency Response to Addiction. It is probably one of the highlights of my career in the field. And every time, this is 5 years ago, and yet every time when I look at it, I go, wow, this was a really terrific and amazing. I was really privileged to have gone through this experience. So let me begin by making this qualification. During this presentation, you may notice that I'll be using the terms PSUD, people with substance use disorder, PWUDs, people with who use drugs according to UNODC terms, and also addict. It seems that the qualification here is that for people in recovery, when we say I am an addict, it is with pride and humility, because it was at this point that this admission became a turning point in our lives when honesty and courage set us free from the bondage of shame and lies of our deceits. Why? To remind me to stay humble, because we do get well. And it's hard to be humble when things are really going well. And this reminds me to stay humble, to remain in an attitude of gratitude to my higher power for this grace called recovery. Grace is because it's not deserved, and yet we got it. And simply because when I say I'm an addict, it's simply because it's my truth and my path to wellness. And it's like, so this is the qualification here. I hope that's clear. No, if you are not a person with a lived experience and you use the term addict, that's not a good thing. It's a no-no. But if you are in recovery and we use this term among ourselves, it is a term of probably even honor. So I went to the office again. I went back to that office again. And I know ang daming tao sa labas, no? People in recovery, halo-halo, people of the community. I go, why are you, I was late, so I said, why are you guys here? So then I went inside, nakita ko nga, inside the office, puro naka-uniforme, PNP, daming mga PNP personnel. Then we had our meeting, no? So pumasok na din the other people, they sat behind us in the table, around the table, and it was a heated discussion. Anong gagawin? Basically, heated in the sense na we knew that we needed to do something, but nobody knew what to do, because there were a lot of obstacles. One, PDEA said, was the law. Put somebody in rehab, you need to go through some processes like a petition, and all of this would take at least a month. And we had 1,200 people who surrendered, who needed to file petitions, get court orders para makapasok sa rehab. And there was only one or two lawyers, city lawyers, who were authorized or capable of handling that in the city. So it will probably take us decades to finish all of these people, sabi niya. Then, of course, nobody else had the program, and the police were asking for help. This is not our job. Hindi namin trabaho to. So that was the atmosphere. Gusto tumulong lahat. Everybody wanted to help, but nobody knew how. But we were in that room for a reason. So finally, I don't know if it was me or Betty who said, basta sinabi ko, ang specialty ko is treatment. Let us handle the treatment, but I don't know about the law. And Betty said, social welfare can provide the documentation, the profiling, the intake. Okay, fine. And then yung chief of police sa Pules said, kami nang bahala, yung mga police na will take care of security and transportation. We'll bring them to the venue. Okay, venue. Saan natin gagawin yung venue? Ang dami yan. And somebody from the mayor's office, Mayor Tumogan at the time, volunteered, we can have it at the Baguio Convention Center. Okay, so set. Meron ng program. Wala pa palang program, pero meron ng venue. No? So, okay, let's take a break. And inisip ko, anong bibigay ko ditong program? Kasi ang daming tao niyan, and we only had a short period of time because we needed to process as many people as possible to get them to safety. No? So I wrote some notes on a piece of paper, basically 5 components. The back of my mind, what works for us is the program in the treatment facility. So I compress ko na lang muna and see, bahala na si God kung paano to tatanggapin ng mga surrenderies. No? So I put everything in there. Next slide. So five objectives ng BERA was we wanted to equip the clients or the surrenderies with abstinence and recovery tools as we have, provide psychological first aid for the trauma of Tokang, minimize or mitigate the war on drug harms, which was not just the physical casualties of EJK, but psychological. No? We wanted to reduce stigma and also provide a rallying point for the members of the community to gather around para tumulong, because people wanted to help. That was really surprising. I mean, not really surprising, but heartening. No? Next slide. So we went to the Baguio Convention Center on July 26, 2016. No? Nakakatuwa because there were people from Angeles, from Mindanao in recovery that came. They wanted to help. There were maybe about 60 surrenderies in there. Then in the gallery, there were maybe another 200 people from the Rotary Club, from all walks, from the community of Baguio, from the different agencies. The mayor was there. And they wanted to see, I don't know, they wanted to see or they wanted to help. I would like to think that they all wanted to help. Ano ba yung pwede nilang may tulong? Because at that, dun first session na yun, we didn't have coffee. I think AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, donated the coffee and the coffee cups, yung ganun, tulungan na lang kung ano yung matadala mo, parang potluck. So we did that. July 26, 2016. And then I found out a few days later that somebody else also in Malaybalay in Mindanao had something similar. Si Piting Batar, he was also Colombo Plan trained and person in recovery. So we're really thankful to Colombo Plan for providing the people in recovery with the tools, with the self-efficacy, the confidence to respond. Basically, these were the first responders throughout the country. Next slide, please. So we evaluated ano ba nangyari the first day. It's a very rough program, so we streamline yung mga PowerPoint. So on your bottom screen, you can see our partners. This was General Saron of the PNP. Nakakatuwa because we thought we were being addicts were being stigmatized, but apparently the police were being stigmatized. So there was stigma on both sides, and this intersection helped us to become aware of each other as human beings. We're not on other sides of the fence, but we're on the same side. And then on the middle photo, you can see the Office of the Social Welfare. Nandiyan yung mga, very few lang ang social workers ng Baguio. Nandiyan lahat sila yung mga nakapula. Tapos yung mga hindi nakapula, yan yung staff ko naman sa Serenity. So yung naka-Nike jacket na violet. And then, may advertisement pa, Nike. Anyway, so tapos dito on the left are some of the faith-based partners and some of the ICAPs that were the people delivering the BERA. Next slide. So the activities were the steps 1 to 5. These are all the recommended or the evidence-based approaches recommended in our UTC trainings. We have CBT, kinumbay namin CBT, 12 steps, the assertiveness training delivered in the Colombo Plan style platforms of training, contingency management, stages of change, and of course the psychoeducation. Next, by December 19, 6 months went by, and we had graduated 227 out of 279 who attended. So maganda yung mataas yung compliance or attendance rate. Maybe also because if they came on time, binibigyan sila ng bigas, canned goods, and if they were participatory or active participation in class, binibigyan ng mga candy or kung ano-anong prizes. So we were using positive reinforcement as part of the contingency management, as part of the approaches. Naka-integrate into the modules. So in the beginning, nag-umpisa lang kami ng mga 19 in the class, but by the last class we had in December, umaabot na siya ng 79 per class. What was surprising was even those people who were not on the watch list, especially the Muslims. So this culminated in a Christmas party. Parang potluck siya. So everybody brought and then nandun yung PNP. So I think we have a little clip on that on the next slide. Okay. Ito yung buta dito. Halo na yung PNP at yung PWUDs. Surrendering. Buwan pa yung mga pulis at halo. So the food was brought in by everybody, potluck siya. Daming kapalitan, balde-balde. We had over 100 people who attended this Christmas party. Unfortunately, that was the last of the picture. Next slide. So it was also with on top care of the Bishop Valentin Timok. Also other LGUs like Sablan under the leadership of their mayor and as far away south as Toledo, Cebu, under the late Senator John Osmeña. So the last day of the workshop, ang problema ngayon was sustainability, no? So we invite self-help groups like Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous to conduct workshops so the clients themselves could sustain it independent of funding or government help, uh, as the rest of the fellowships around the world do it. No? It's free and it's successful because it is directed, self-directed. I mean, client-directed, meaning it's not social workers or psychologists or doctors that run the program, but the people with the disease themselves taking responsibility and actually feeling the natural consequences or benefits of recovery, not just abstinence, but recovery. On your right picture, makita mo, the bishop is actually wearing the native garb. No? So these are the tribal elders, the leaders of the community. No? And on your at the upper left, that's the closing prayer of a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. What was significant about this? Because we didn't ask people to take drug tests or be alcohol free during the sessions. But as long as you can come in and keep up, you're fine. No? And so the first night, this was held at the bishop's residence. So the first night, syempre, nasa bundok, sarap mag-inuman, no? So they went out, bawal uminom sa bishop, kaila bishop, no? So they went out, sa labas ng gate, nag-inuman. So what we did was, sinabayan namin ng meeting naman ng Alcoholics Anonymous or NA meeting sa loob. So amazingly, by the third day, kukunti na lang yung nasa labas. Most of them were inside the meetings. They were not drinking, they were actually attending the meetings. By the seventh day or the last days namin, wala na nagiinuman sa labas. What does this mean? It means we don't have to force anybody to come to recovery. By itself, it will be an attraction. Ito naman, we conducted pala some pre and post tests. So the results were, we used a pollution psych test, and basically at the end of 7 days, there was an 8% increase in spirituality. Next slide. And then depression was reduced by 28% using the Beck test as a measurement. What was curious was PTSD, no? Parang tumaas siya at the end of it, no? So maybe because di nila alam na may trauma sila. And then when we gave the test, lalong na trauma na. So this needs to be further looked at. No? Bakit tumaas yung mga test na yan, no? Next slide. These were the exit questions. This was made by Professor Francis Mina of UPPGH. So ito yung mga sagot ng respondents. Ano yung hindi malinaw? It's all clear. At aking pagkatao, and then what else would you like to learn? How to teach the program, learn NA, how to help others that did not go to rehab. Then tinanong sila, do you have a problem? 56% said yes at the end. Do you need help? 67% said yes. Are you asking for help? 67% said yes. No? So apparently those who said no and no answer were still in the pre-contemplation stage. No? This is pero ito yung magandang tanong. Would you recommend Bera to others? No? Basically 88% no? said they would strongly recommend or would recommend, and only 12% said maybe. What's significant is nobody said no, they would not recommend. Okay, next slide. Okay, what made it successful? One was because it was people in recovery themselves who were delivering the modules. We had the people, the professionals, the social workers in the background providing the necessary documentation. We had the faith-based workers providing the food. We had the police providing security. Treatment must be fun. Unfortunately, after abstinence, hindi mo talaga, I've learned this through the science, that we won't enjoy the natural consequences of abstinence until a few months after. So in the meantime, until before that happens, the health providers would need to provide some sort of artificial rewards. No? That's why the contingency management works. No? Okay, next slide. So some of the reflections from the sessions were nakakamiss, hindi ko makalimutan, a social worker. One of the most fulfilling things I've done, give back to the community from Ken. Seeing and being part of something where addicts are helping other addicts, it's a feeling that compares to none. By Ricky, he's now the chief of the Angeles City Anti-Drug Abuse Council. And paano ko matututunan magbago? From a Bera client. That means napunta na siya sa preparation stage. Next slide, more time. What we learned, the importance of collaboration. Treating addiction is a team effort. It's important to enroll the community and the stakeholders in a program. Substance use disorder and evidence-based practices training. It has to be fun and rewarding. Positive reinforcement works. So this is the challenge, no? Can the law actually catch up with emerging science? Can the law be changed enough so that there can be a fertile platform for local governments to find the political will and buy into the advocacy that is presented, adopt evidence-based approaches, and support peer-led recovery initiatives and the recovery-oriented systems of care? Okay, so this one, ito, kasama to sa challenge, no? We were here in Toledo. We were asked to. I brought the workers, LG workers, to the BJMP at the request of Senator Osmeña to do an immersion of the SBIRT. But I found out here that there were 700 detainees, people deprived, PDLs ang tawag nila, people deprived of liberty, waiting for a drug dependency exam, and they've been there for almost 2 years, no? No trial, no court, wala. Just because they just needed to the DDE, and it was not, they didn't feel safe outside, so they went in. And there was only one doctor yata who was accredited by DOH to perform the DDE in Cebu. So there were not just 700, but 20,000, the entire Cebu area, in jail, na walang charges, walang nothing, so waiting for this DDE. Nagalit din si Senator. Anyway, at the end of this, we couldn't just lethal. Everybody started, ventilating, nag-iyakan. So we did a little intervention. I used NLP programming para ma-debrief lang yung mga interview. But a few months later, the warden called me up. I think 2 or 3 months later, he said, we've nasa 400 na lang yung laman namin from 700. So that brought awareness to the community. We're not statistics lang, that these are human beings. No? And of course, this wouldn't have happened without help from the INL, the International Narcotics Bureau of the U.S. State Department, of the U.S. Embassy in Manila, care of Brandon Hudspeth. No? He was able to advocate to get a grant to train over 200 selected candidates from the criminal justice system made up of PDEA, PNP, public safety colleges, and BJMP. No? And I think the impact, nakita ko naman yung impact. For me, I would like to believe, because in the first 2 years of the war on drugs, there were 25,000 casualties. No? But after we started conducting these trainings, these casualties were reduced to 5,000 from 2018 to 2020. Next slide. Okay, so these are just some of the awards of Vera, or recognitions. No? So there's Mayor Tumogan. I handed him over the plaque. I forgot where the plaque came from. So next slide. Okay, so I'd like to end this, well, almost end it. No, I'd like to read this. If you let me. The therapeutic value of one recovering addict helping another addict is without parallel. This is from Narcotics Anonymous, founded in 1953 by Jimmy Kinnon. And when this addict in recovery undergoes training, now the addict is called PSUD or PWUDs, and abides by the professional ethics, he emerges a better helper and a human being. And as it happened in the Bera, when the above peer-led initiatives were supported by community and government, it is really, we could win the war not on drugs, but the war on addiction. This is a vision I hope to share with my fellows in ISAC and the rest of the field. So next slide. Okay, this is a commercial uh, made by one of our fellow series in recovery. I think this means siya ka na, manageable, on recovery, and fellowship. Okay, I think that's it. So if you need further information on us, these are our contact numbers. We are a training provider for Colombo Plan, also PRC CPD provider. We also have the usual treatment, TAU. So these are the contact numbers below. You can call Joe Brown, dating alcoholic, pero now one of the better counselors here in Baguio. Our email. Okay, thank you. It's been a privilege. And thank you. God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Sir Jun. I was smiling all the way while I was watching your presentation, looking at familiar faces. So it's good to hear someone leading recovering persons, helping others also to recover. And these are just not recovering people. These are people who also went through formal training under the UTC. So talagang they know what they're doing and they're living the life of being in recovery. So thank you very much, Sir Junjun. That is really an invaluable experience that you shared with us. So before we move on, I know that there are people who have been asking so many questions. Again, we will accommodate your questions after all of our speakers have presented. So I'd like to encourage everyone to keep posting your questions in the chat box. Moving on now, allow me to introduce our next speaker who will be presenting the DSWD's Yakap Bayan Program's Social Reintegration Approach. So without further ado, please welcome Ms. Nolibelin Makabagdal from DSWD. Ms. Nolibelin.
Good day, everyone. I am Nolibeline Makabagdal from the Department of Social Welfare and Development, Social Technology Bureau, the program development arm of the department. So today, I'll be sharing with you the Yakabayan program, social reintegration approach, combined experience of DSWD as a national government agency and local government experiences. So this started in 2016, wherein the vision of the program was to convert or transform surrenderers to become community leaders. So here's a short video of what is the Yakap Bayan program is all about.
For a better and brighter future for the next generation. A comfortable, peaceful, and just society. That's the state of the country that Mayor Rodrigo Roa Duterte envisioned. Due to the rampant drugs, crime, and corruption that beset the country, their eradication from the society became his battle cry during his campaign for presidency. True to his words, President Duterte launched a massive campaign against illegal drugs upon assumption of office, which started with Oplan Tokhang that yielded 1.3 million surrenderers. Under the administration, we go beyond mere making them surrender. We recognize that surrenderers are part of families too. They're all part of a much larger whole, the Filipino society. To defeat the drug menace, the government readily welcomes people who turn their backs against drugs and help them undergo rehabilitation and reintegration. After rehabilitation for recovering drug personalities or RDPs to return to their families and communities as better and productive citizens, we aim to transform them from liabilities into assets, from surrenderers into leaders, through series of capacity building activities and community service in line with disaster preparedness and response. This journey to recovery will be monitored through case management. This is the Yakap Bayan framework of intervention. We can achieve recovery by keeping in mind the direction and trajectory, weaving together the readily available resources, not just of DSWD, in order to provide medical, psychosocial, occupational, and spiritual support to those undergoing rehabilitation and reintegration and their families. And by integrating local culture into the solution, we can be assured that the interventions are appropriate to the clients. The following serve as the framework's legal basis. Currently, several local governments at the provincial, city, and municipal level follow Yakap Bayan. These localities have already created force multipliers for emergencies out of their constituent RDPs during and after rehabilitation. Just recently, the Social Technology Bureau completed the first phase of model building, which is process documentation. Teams were deployed to the 6 study sites to harness the good practices being done. The result of model building will then be promoted to be institutionalized for the implementation of the Yakap Bayan framework at the local government through a Dangerous Drugs Board resolution. This effort is part of the department's role in developing social technologies, providing technical assistance and resource augmentation or TARA, and setting standards and monitoring compliance to social service providers. By building a strong network of support for the recovering drug personalities, together with their families and communities, we can transform surrenderists into leaders that we can work hand in hand with in keeping our country comfortable, peaceful, and just. That is what the Yakap Bayan framework aims to do.
So there you go. As shown in the video, we partnered with some local government units who said yes to the challenge of providing an opportunity for social reintegration of recovering persons who use drugs. So we visited 6 local government units, and they participated in a process documentation study. And this study revealed that for us to have an effective recovery program for persons who use drugs, here are the enabling conditions. First, the LGU should adopt a whole of LGU approach. So, true to the administration's appeal, no, of whole of government approach, these local government demonstrated a whole of LGU approach. Second, they have functional anti-drug abuse committee. Third, they created a multidisciplinary team, and they included the local DRRM office, and there was constant technical assistance and resource augmentation to local governments by the national government agency. And last but not the least, very visible was the engagement of the civil society organization, law enforcement group, and faith-based organization. So all of this, we crafted a program design for the Yakap Bayan based on these enabling conditions. So now, what is Yakap Bayan program? This program is being offered to local government units for the reintegration of persons who use drugs. And we are actually targeting PWUDs who have completed primary treatment, regardless of age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. In the Akabayan program, the intended beneficiaries, aside from those general termed as PWUDs, we are catering to the children who use drugs. No, this is pursuant to the DDB regulation number 6 and 7. Also, those what we call surrenderies, voluntary and compulsory admission, plea bargainers, or court-mandated clients. And also, under the program, the family members of RP Woods and the communities where they reside will actually benefit from the Yakap Bayan program. So, Yakap Bayan is to be implemented by the local government ADAC through a multidisciplinary team with dedicated social workers who will serve as case managers. Also, This will entail provision of aftercare and reintegration services such as, but not limited to, counseling sessions, health and fitness therapy, spiritual intervention, subject to the result of a multidisciplinary team assessment. Yakabayan also pushes for the weaving of existing resources of the local government unit, national government agency, and the civil society organization. Thereby, we are adopting the whole of nation, whole of local government, and whole of community approaches. So, in the Yakabayan program, we are advocating for this framework wherein the recovering persons who use drugs will be at the center of the helping relationship, surrounded by the family who will be enabled through different services and the community where they reside, wherein the stigma in the community is prevented and the institution, which is the local government unit, is being supported, capacitated to implement the Yakabayan program. So these will not be treated in isolation, but they will be treated as a whole. Also, to facilitate the social reintegration of the Yakap Bayan program, we are introducing these key dimensions because based on studies, social reintegration is beyond treatment. It is about actually addressing the issue of social inclusion, wherein RP Woods usually feel that they are set aside, they have these feelings of abandonment also, and rejection from the community. So in the Yakabayan program, we are introducing four key dimensions wherein the PWUDs are assisted, families are prepared to become co-journeyers in the recovery, and community attitudes and behaviors are being addressed. And of course, this will only be possible if the local government as an institution, especially in the barangay, is supported by the national government agencies and civil society partners. The objectives of the program is beyond treatment. The objective of the program is for RP Woods to have improved social functioning and reintegrated to their families and communities. So we look beyond treatment. We are also addressing role performance. We are also looking at their functioning in a daily basis. So for our specific objectives, this is consistent to the framework. The local government units are providing adequate preparation, transition for reintegration among Yakap Bayan clients. Second objectives, by the end of program implementation, we want the families of the Yakap Bayan to have enhanced coping capacities. The client should be able to respond to the dynamic environment. No, this is where they are going to deal with the triggers, um, possible persuasions when they return to their communities and even within their families. Number three, we want the families to have enhanced knowledge, attitudes, and skills towards the RP Woods to serve as co-journeyers of the Yakabayan clients. This is to counter codependency. Also, last but not the least, we want to see communities providing support to the clients. They should be able to provide enabling environment and to counter stigma in the communities. So, um, the Yakabayan program has four components consistent to the framework and to the objectives. So, number one, um, the LGU mechanisms for social reintegration should be addressed. The capacities of the ADACs and even the barangay level civil society organization, the multidisciplinary teams should be capacitated in order to facilitate the social reintegration. Second component is, of course, we want to see the improvement in the self-mastery, self-management of RP Woods through several aftercare and relapse prevention activities. Third component is focusing on the family, strengthening services. In one of our discussions in the program delivery, our Pantawid Pamilya beneficiaries will be assisted also if there are families of RP Woods. So we will be focusing on strengthening the family. Last, community support services. So the immediate community where RP Woods are residents, we will be implementing social behavior and communication strategies in order to gain support for the recovery of the RP Woods. But all of this will be possible through a case management process. And this is the case management that we are advocating for the Yakap Bayan program. We believe that case management should not be at the micro level alone, but it should influence systems. It should influence a wider influence and wider scope, no? So if this case management, this is a sample of a trajectory of partnership wherein all actors are and stakeholders are engaged in the process. So beginning from the ICAD PADS agencies of the government as technical assistance and resource augmentation providers, we should be able to help capacitate the local government unit ADACs and the multidisciplinary team. We should be able to invest in a lot of capacity building for these frontline service providers in order to have to develop the needed knowledge, attitude, and develop the skills that they need. It should start from them, no? The non-stigmatizing attitude, non-judgmental attitude should be able to be demonstrated at the local government units first, and so on. So we have this case management process consistent with the DDB regulation and the client flow. And here in the right side of the PowerPoint, we have the multidisciplinary team members. So if you will note, the DSWD, the ILG, Department of Health are actually in charge of the training of the LGU ADACs and the verification of surrenderers by the ADACs, screening, primary treatment by LGU trained personnel and local health office. Children, the welfare of children who use drugs is also ensured by the local social welfare and development office. A multidisciplinary assessment will be implemented by the ADAC, by the LSWDO, and those members of the multidisciplinary team. And of course, the aftercare and relapse prevention activities are here, community service opportunities, income earning opportunities, family restoration and strengthening activities, and community reintegration and stigma prevention should be implemented by the ADAC, by the combined effort of these sample agencies present at the local government unit. And also, this is envisaged to contribute to the improvement of quality of life and functioning and self-recovery of the RP wood. So, with this established support system for the RP woods, we believe that reintegration will happen and will be achieved. So, for my last slide, I would like to show you the theory of change that the program have seen in several local government units. So, with adequate family support, adequate community support, and adequate local government, barangay, institutional support, these will lead to, and this usually led to, and we have seen this so far to some recovering persons who use drugs, strength in character, they became socially responsible individuals, they became productive, and they were able to perform again their social roles in their family and in their community. And also in their communities, we witnessed reduced stigma and discrimination, thereby contributing to higher sense of belonging among RP Woods. They feel that before they were neglected, they were stigmatized, they were set aside, but now they feel that they are included, they have these feelings of high sense of belonging. And so we are contributing to their successful reintegration into their own families and their communities. So that's the Yakabayan program. Thank you very much. And should you have questions, please let us know. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nolivelin, for that presentation. With that video you shared and what you discussed, it has given us a good glimpse into the real difference that great programs can make within the realms of policy and governance, addressing social and health problems with regards to drug use. Nakita ko yung Yakap Bayan program ninyo. I have seen that it is connected to what Ms. Peters presented earlier, aligning programs to global standards. So thank you as well for that. Again, so sa mga audience natin, I know you're eager to be answered, no, yung mga questions ninyo right after all our presenters are done. We will accommodate that. Now, our next presenter will be giving us a look into the recovery experience, stress, recovery capital, and personal views on addiction and recovery in post-treatment addiction recovery. So please welcome Mr. Riz Castillo, the project manager of Colombo Plan's Drug Advisory Program. Mr. Riz.
Okay. Okay, good morning, everybody. And of course, thank you for having me in this forum. I'm privileged to be able to share this research with you. I've shared this research. I think the last time was in 2019. So it's been a while since I've talked about this. Yeah. So thank you for allowing me to share this research in this virtual space. So today, this morning, I'll be sharing with you the research I've done actually from my master's thesis, and it has evolved after that. And with this study, we submitted it together. I submitted this together with Dr. Ron from De La Salle University on the recovery experience, stress, recovery capital, and personal views on addiction and recovery in post-treatment addiction recovery. So by the way, I'm Therese. I'm the project manager for the Philippine initiatives from the Colombo Plan Drug Advisory Program. So what does this study really focus on? The entire research focuses on what happens after treatment. So when we think about recovery, there are a lot of things that come to mind. Maybe for this, you have two images here in front of you. You can try to observe what comes to mind when you think about recovery. So what is recovery like? So we may expect recovery to be that straight line, but then the reality is, the truth is, it does have its ups and downs, its detours, a lot of detours, which is all part of that process. It is a process of healing and discovery beyond addressing the symptoms of substance use or addiction. So I'm going to share with you, what do we know about recovery so far? Okay, so some of these things I just mentioned earlier, but specifically about treatment and what happens after treatment. So what it tells us is that treatment has an end, or a treatment program has an end. However, recovery is an ongoing process, wherein in this study it focuses on reintegrating to that mainstream. When we say mainstream, what is normal or the day-to-day for the people who are in recovery. So it could be things like going to school, meeting friends, applying for a job, writing a resume, etc. So it is that individual journey that is unique to every person. It's also said to be going back to those quote unquote normal activities after treatment. Okay. Now, what is addiction? So there have been many definitions of addiction over time, but what we know of addiction in biological or the science of it is that a person with addiction to psychoactive substances or an SUD, a substance use disorder, means that it is chronic, that it is a relapsing disease of the brain, which is what the science tells us, meaning a lapse or a relapse may be part of that process of dealing with addiction or going through addiction. So over time, we had been influenced by influenced by society, culture, as we evolved and learned more about addiction. And now I would say there are more. We have variety of perspectives of how to look at addiction. So what we know is that it implicates the brain and our ability to manage emotions, handle our impulses, our daily functions. So thinking about a person who finishes a treatment program and engages in recovery or sustains the recovery, it's not exactly the end of the addiction. It is that stage of maintenance, a stage where that individual in recovery tries to sustain what has been achieved during treatment. Okay, so just a few more things before I head on to the method. Okay, so after treatment, literature also tells us that there are pressures to do more, to be more, to make up for lost time during active addiction or when the person is using. And being able to manage that stress is a major factor in sustaining recovery. The inability to manage that stress can lead to a lapse or a relapse if it's not resolved. So not a lot of research had been done in terms of stress during the post treatment period. This is also one of the reasons why I included this here. Okay. So so how does a person in recovery navigate his way through stress? So one of the concepts is recovery capital, which some of you may be familiar with. So what we know of recovery capital is it is that source of strength and motivation in recovery. It includes the person's resources from the basic needs to financial needs to relationships, etc. So basically everything that allows the person to manage recovery over time. So this includes all those resources, those tools, those skills. So what the research tells us is that social recovery capital, specifically the relationships around the person, is significant in sustaining recovery. So morely focused on the maintenance. So also recovery capital, it's not a case of you have it or you don't. Recovery capital is something that you can be able to increase over time as you progress in recovery. Okay, so this research asks this main question, which what are the experiences of people in post-treatment addiction recovery, wherein it asks these three questions: how is stress experienced in post-treatment? How does recovery capital help or limit a person in post-treatment? And lastly, how does the person in post-treatment view his addiction and recovery? So these are the three questions. So briefly sharing with you the method. I'm not going to go in such detail on this, but just to briefly show you, the participants in this study are the ones who received formal treatment from substance use disorder from 8 subjects. Those who have achieved sustained recovery, so that means a benchmark of at least 5 years, excluding nicotine. The average ages, the youngest at 31 and 58, the oldest. So the tool has been validated, interview guide, data analysis, and then we've gone through external audit. Of course, some method limitations, that the primary basis are the quality of the responses. However, it had adapted a very person-centered, non-threatening interview approach. We have, of course, some ethical considerations on confidentiality and emotional safety within these interviews. Okay, so briefly, a summary of our demographics. From the 8 participants, 7 are male, 1 is female, average age of 28. Yeah, there you go. So all except 1 have been in recovery for at least 10 years. So quite a chunk of experience in recovery, minimum of at least 7+ years and a maximum of 20 years. Okay. So to share you the results, of course, these are case studies. Like I would call it probably 8 stories of recovery here briefly. Okay. So to share with you the emerging themes, the overarching themes of our research questions, you can see here in one slide. Then let's go to her research question. So for stress, how is stress experienced? These were the emerging themes. Okay. So generally, the reintegration to that mainstream environment, which includes work, school, community, alleviates a lot of stress because it is a period of change. It is a period of transition. There are some sample responses here. I have to catch up for the lost years. I have to compete with the normal kids. Also dealing with people and social situations. This includes managing peer pressure, dealing with friends. What do I say? How do I respond? How do I act? How do I act, quote unquote, normal? There's also a sample response here because at the same time you're trying to live a normal life or reintegrate yourself with the day-to-day, but at the same time you are protecting your recovery. You are protecting not coming back to use. Okay, some other themes under stress, dealing with life changes. So a very abundant, a huge chunk of this would include dealing with sometimes seemingly positive events can also cause stress for someone, like finding out your partner is pregnant or getting married or moving into a new place. So this would include adjusting to those even developmental changes while in recovery. Yan. One example here, nag-iisa ako, yun ang pinaka-stress. Yung dumaan, stress ng buhay ko. Syempre, very stressful kasi iniisip mo kung saan kukuha. So this is in the context of this participant had lost his mother during recovery, and therefore not just grief, but also being the one in charge of household responsibilities, etc. Okay. And rebuilding relationships. So although most of the participants had expressed improved relationships, there are challenges and stress involved in reestablishing connections within and among family members. So which one of them had shared, I was afraid of my daughter because she didn't welcome me. So it was, she didn't want anyone to know she's seeing us shrink. So this was a situation where this participant had a complicated relationship with her daughter, and that caused a lot of stress. Okay. Dealing with financial responsibilities and job security. So this included unemployment, financial crisis, starting to provide for the family. So a lot of role reversals as well in terms of certain responsibilities in the household, where it does cause stress on being a provider, shifting back to a provider role, compared to previously when I was in treatment, when I was just focusing on recovery, or I was just focusing on treatment. And now I have to make those adjustments to coming back to certain responsibilities. Okay. So here, recovery capital, you could see it. These are the emerging themes in recovery capital: the personal recovery capital and social recovery capital. Where under personal recovery capital, this includes engaging in meaningful activities in recovery, because it is a stage where I have learned things, I have acquired certain skills. It is a time where I look for what is meaningful to me. Activities that give me a sense of meaning, give me a sense of purpose. Also, upholding personal values in sustaining recovery. So here it comes, what helps in me driving my recovery are those values that I have that drive my behaviors, or drive the decisions that I would make. So it could be family, it could be being trustworthy, etc. Also utilizing the personal strengths and skills. So this would include acquired and developed strengths that are helpful in sustaining recovery. So I encounter stress almost every day, but instead of giving up or giving in, I try to think positive. So it's basically being able to apply things that you've learned, and being able to practice that as you continue staying in recovery. Oops. So another important aspect are the relationships around you, your recovery connections, including your set of friends supportive of recovery, including friendships, and protect those that protect recovery. So here you come into making those decisions. Who are the people that I keep, and what are the kind of relationships I want around me? This also includes family as a strong contributor in sustaining recovery. Experiences with families provided strength during difficult times. So a general theme that had been found would be that the family support that surrounds the person that helped him sustain or stay in recovery. Okay, so now, what do they think about addiction? What do they think about recovery after treatment? So, coming after treatment, looking at or thinking about addiction as a lifestyle that that he had lived with substances, and also a big part of it is being hindered from having meaningful relationships. I never thought of having long-term or substantial relationships during addiction. It was also seen as, or the substance had been seen as temporary relief. That for that time it was pleasurable. For that time it felt good. However, coming into realization where it was so fast, something that's uncontrollable. Most of my decisions were mostly to satisfy that addiction. And then the views on recovery included recovery being a blessing. So me having this kind of life is a blessing. And also thinking about recovery as an ongoing process and not exactly an end. An ongoing process that that individual is going through. So also another outcome, that another result that came out of it was, of course, during these interviews, it was maybe in the early stages on the War of Drugs campaign. So at that time, the participants thought that it had been in a way a motivator to be a good example, to show that these are the people in recovery. It's good to be a living example that there's a solution that can be done. It's good to show others that I could be good, I could be at par with anybody at work, at school, etc., while I am in recovery. So, what could we conclude from this research? Well, one, formal treatment is only the foundation of initiating and engaging recovery. So 5 years, it's that benchmark in sustained recovery. Sustaining recovery after treatment, it does have its threats and pressures that may lead to a lapse to substance use if that person is unable to get enough support and enough recovery capital or resources to sustain or maintain the changes that had been made. So there is a need to consciously make efforts to build that recovery capital to maximize and capitalize on the strengths and be able to manage the deficits or the barriers that the individuals in recovery experience. So situations like financial crisis, relationship conflicts, unemployment, these are critical areas for the recovering person that require external social support. So it does tell you that it's not just one person making it work. It is with a lot of other tools and resources that allow me to stay in recovery. Another thing is that gaining awareness on the purpose of recovery is a very valuable thing, a very valuable aspect in choosing to be in recovery. So it is now that conscious decision. What is staying in recovery for? What is the meaning of this? And myself having those insights become very valuable at this stage. So the individual in recovery would also be more resilient. So even though they did express stressful experiences, these are manageable and workable experiences with the help and support of a recovery community and a substantial recovery capital. So just some recommendations for researchers. Just to briefly share with you here. Of course, it could be more samples, quantitative research, or integrating that quantitative aspect. Implementation of a chronic care treatment model. Looking into what makes a supportive family, and probably being able to see how socioeconomic status and that recovery potential in treatment are connected. So for practitioners, providers, so these are just some suggestions here that I'm just going to breeze through. So it is important to pay attention to those transitions that happen with the clients that we work with the individuals in recovery, so that they are equipped into being able to sustain and maintain changes, and that making sure that aftercare or continuing care programs are available, are accessible to them. Okay. Of course, for recovery support systems, which includes, well, basically all of us, to increase that understanding of recovery as a process and provide enough guidance for transition from treatment to the mainstream or to other settings. To work collaboratively among each other, the collaborative efforts do give positive impact. Participation also in programs and recovery-related activities, and advocacy for people with addiction. Yeah, so I guess that's it. Basically, of course, still sending out the message for us to keep writing about addiction recovery. If you want to know more about this research and be able to access it, it is available in the Philippine Journal of Psychology in the June 2019 issue. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rees, for that insightful presentation. Your research gave our participants a picture of how recovery is with different individuals. Sharing your results are informations they can use to understand that it is really not an easy journey for recovering people. Not because they had treatment, everything will be okay. So no matter how long they have been in treatment. After intensive treatment, it is where real life issues such as personal concerns, financial concerns, adjusting to lifestyle changes, and rebuilding relationships, among others, are still a challenge recovering individuals face. So how banking on recovery capital is essential for them to face stresses and maintain recovery. So also thank you for your suggestion, no? Mga, kung may students ako dito, you know now what are the topics that you can have for your thesis. So thank you again for sharing your study with all of us. Now we move on to our next paper presentation on the lived experiences of recovering Filipino persons who use drugs without family support. So please let us all welcome Ms. Triksha Anko, a community-based drug rehabilitation specialist for the University Research Company Center for Human Services. Ms. Tricia?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Triksha Anko, CBDR specialist from the USAID Renew Health Project. Today, I'm presenting my study on the lived experiences of recovering Filipino persons who use drugs or PWUDs without family support. This paper was co-written by Dr. Nico Canoy of the Ateneo de Manila University. Recovery from substance use has long been studied as a process of improved change, a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being by linking drug dependence treatment and rehabilitation with recovery-oriented systems of care. Across different sources, findings on substance abuse recovery emphasize the importance of integration, different aspects of a person's life, and providing a continuum of care for PWUDs by families and communities to ensure efficient and long-term results. As substance use practitioners, our goal is to prevent relapse, which is usually caused by high-risk situations, a person's coping skills, and outcome expectancies together with other covert factors such as lifestyle imbalances, urges, and cravings. To address potential for relapse, studies on recovery capital emerged to highlight the quality and quantity of internal and external resources that can be used as anchors to initiate and sustain recovery. And this is where community-based drug rehabilitation or CBDR comes in, providing support in communities through family-based interventions as crucial elements of successful and sustained recovery, harnessing the role of family support to improve communication skills, parenting skills, couple support, and even prevent child abuse. Strategies targeting family recovery capital enhance the quality of life of individuals and families and elevate long-term recovery outcomes. PWUDs were seen to manifest healthier coping when families are more encouraging and supportive of them. But on the flip side, negative expectations and significant life changes like geographical relocation, illness of family members, or separation from family members have detrimental effects on recovering PWUDs. Individuals from collectivist countries, such as the Philippines, for instance, are more likely to view themselves as interdependent, highlighting a sense of heightened group identity and interdependence that give Filipinos the assurance of being looked after by their in-group, typically involving their family, kin, and peers, along with community support and the presence of their extended families. And in such cases, individuals who report greater social cooperation, familial support, and unity were more likely to seek professional psychological help. So it became a standard that program success was anchored on highlighting key aspects of Filipino culture and context through the use of small groups and emphasis on the role of family, community, and spirituality as recovery capital among Filipinos. However, there seems to be a gap that we are seemingly forgetting. There are others who don't have that kind of support available. And this is the reality. As such, this research argues the need to further understand the experiences of Filipino drug users with little or no perceived family support. Possible CBDR interventions, specifically for those with less or no family involvement, may have limited effectivity as it may sidestep how specific experiences of drug recovery among Filipinos are enmeshed to one's family as the primary unit of care and support in times of adversity. So in this light, there is value in examining the unique experiences of recovering Filipino PWUDs without perceived family support in relation to the context wherein heavy emphasis is placed on the active involvement of families in recovery, especially in programs and interventions. More specifically, to answer our research questions, what are the lived experiences of recovering Filipino PWUDs in CBDR without the presence of immediate family support? Particularly, what is the experience of recovery like for Filipino PWUDs without immediate family support? A mixed group of 10 adult PWUDs identified through snowball sampling were interviewed. In their participation and completion of the KKDK program, which is a 15-week evidence-based CBDR program for PWUDs and their families, designed to develop resilience, and that was at the time being implemented in the city of San Juan. These modules were created to involve families in treatment, strengthen support, create opportunities for members to communicate, express their thoughts, feelings to each other, and reconcile existing family matters. Participants with no family members at the time were grouped separately from those who came with theirs. Reason for families' absence included relocation, abandonment, and low family support. They were either separated from their spouses or live-in partners or have remained unmarried. They are either living by themselves, residing separately from their biological or nuclear families with minimal to no communication at all. Some were living with non-relatives while they were enrolled in the program. Over-analytical process was guided by IPA or Interpretative Phenomenological Analysis, where vivid and embodied accounts of PWUDs were examined, along with an interpretative activity in making sense of their recovery experiences. So the transcripts collected were read and reread repeatedly, and another round of analysis was conducted after a month. Eventually, themes were then reduced by clustering to form stronger and more coherent accounts. As a final output, a table was created composed of higher order themes and sub-themes. So our research data established 4 higher order themes or main themes, and these are: number 1, experiences of loss and longing while in recovery; second, experiences of coping; third, experiences of self-improvement; and lastly, experiences of rekindling, rejoining, and restarting social connections. So the first theme is the experience of loss and longing while in recovery. Attached to their situation of being physically and emotionally distant from their families, PWUDs experience feelings of regret over having used drugs in the past, causing their family to part ways and members to distance themselves. Loneliness is another common feeling shared among all interviewed PWUDs. Is usually caused by not being with their families physically or having anyone at home to have a conversation with. This PWUD particularly shared his experience spending the holidays by himself in isolation. So aside from loneliness and regret, PWUDs also feel that there's nothing else they can do to fix their current situation. This particular PWUD shared how he tried to turn his life around but failed. He passively accepted the possibility of not waking up the next day, believing that there's nothing more within his control that he can do, so he surrenders his future to fate. Their feelings of surrender exude a certain passivity to one's life, yielding to whatever life brings without an active role in events and decisions. So our second theme is the experience of coping. PWUDs engage in different activities to make use of their time more productively. They share that boredom becomes a trigger for relapse. So joining regular programs in the community or having different kinds of hobbies give them something to look forward to and occupy their time with. Being a part of the program allows them to be with other people who share the same experience. Filipinos are also known for being religious. As problems appear too complex to handle, their locus of control shifts from internal to external, hoping that salvation will be granted by a higher being. So most PWUDs share their experiences of turning to religion to get over their cravings and thoughts about using drugs during their loneliest of times. And as a substitute for illegal drugs, PWUDs turn to other legal substances like alcohol and tobacco to satisfy their cravings. Though the effects of these on the body are different than that of illegal drugs, the effects of these substances still contribute to detrimental long-term health problems. Our third theme is experiences of self-improvement. Strong intrinsic forces become a driver for positive change. Those living by themselves and not receiving support from their families anchor on their personal recovery capital, like improved physical health and psychological well-being as their primary sources of motivation to pursue positive life changes. But PWODs are also motivated by factors outside of themselves, like an imaginary audience, especially for those whose families are not even aware of their recovery efforts. Friends and batchmates from their CBDR program take the role of their cheerleaders, pushing them to tread forward and not to look back. They value the respect they've gained from people around them. PWODs also consciously improve on their usual perceptions and behaviors to gain respect from others, and consequently gain self-respect. The mindful shift to make better decisions and receiving validation from others. Doing good is perceived as an investment built over time, hoping that the same goodness will be given back to them. In this process, they also gain a new sense of self-identity and confidence to overcome challenges and stigma attached to being a drug user. Compared to before, PWODs also have been able to apply key learnings from the program, remembering techniques on refusal, coping, problem solving, developing resilience to turn away from drug use and prevent relapse. It's seen in the light of their ability to bounce back from their problems, including employment, poverty, and family issues. It becomes an experience of strengthening oneself by increasing abilities to overcome life obstacles, even without assistance or support from families or other people. A big part of their self-improvement while in recovery is being able to accept and take accountability of their decisions and realizing how those affect overall life outcomes. PWODs have learned to move forward from negative experiences as consequences of poor decisions and actions in the past. So their locus of control shifts from external to internal as they take more responsibility of their behaviors. So our last theme is in terms of their experiences of rekindling, rejoining, and restoring social connections. PWODs were encouraged to reconnect with their families while attending CBDR, but are still experiencing some challenges in re-establishing communication lines. Reaching out but constant resistance from the other end prevents them from initiating proper conversations. Fortunately for some, family members witnessed them, no? So allowing them space to rekindle contact in attempts of resolving conflicts. The experience of rejoining and reconciling with the family may be difficult, entailing constant effort and commitment, but validate it as the most fulfilling and motivating experience of recovery. In the absence of the previous family and seemingly impossible reconciliation, some PWODs want to start anew instead by moving forward from what have happened and focusing their energies on creating a future for themselves. They want to build a new family of their own, find a new partner to commit to, and turn their affections to. Those PWODs who had no contact and have received no family support during their recovery found it necessary to turn to people around them. Their neighbors, their friends, workmates, and even co-program attendees stood in as alternative sources of support and love throughout their recovery. In their case, there was heavy emphasis focused on social recovery capital, outweighing and replacing the scarce family recovery capital. Those from distant households adapted to find some home in the company of others rather than forcing it on the families of origin. The concept of family now becomes a choice rather than a given. The relative absence of family support reveals layers of influence to a person's experience of recovery, involving oneself, the family, and the broader community. While it triggers strong emotions like loneliness brought about by their personal circumstances, the findings uniquely contribute to the cultural context of family support in light of drug recovery. Key insights to this research can be summarized to these three main points. Number one, overall, these findings resonate with previous local studies on the importance and necessity of extending support to one's family is constructed as always already a given. In a culture where family unit is heavily tied to one's personal identity, any form of withdrawal or diminished support by family members can be severely detrimental to one's physical and psychological health. Number two, recovery in the context of CBDR was an opportunity for PWUDs to address and confront issues with their families. Although not taking an active role in providing support while enrolled in the program, families still became a source of motivation in light of eventual family reunification. In this context, PWUDs view possible reunification as a reward and a badge that prove to their families that they have indeed changed. So those families whose members were still unwilling to reunite turned to other sources of support. These reconstructed safe spaces that are similar to Nauer's discussion of chosen families. In the case of LGBTQI families, wherein individuals actively consider whom to call as their family. Chosen families are bound by the social and emotional support they give each other in times of need and the contribution they give to improve to the PWUD's quality of life. And third, family interventions are critical components of CBDR programs to ensure strengthened support alongside or even after treatment. Additional considerations, however, must be made for PWUDs who are not in close contact or have severed ties with their families at the time of their enrollment. Uninvolved families, especially, for example, those who have poor attendance in family modules, may trigger disappointment and emotional isolation, as well as become a source of gossip by other program attendees who attend sessions with their families. So in the absence of family recovery capital, the resources can extend to include groups outside of one's family, becoming one of the main drivers for sustained recovery. This calls for interventions in CBDR to consider a broader scope of inclusivity, not only focused on families bonded by blood, but encompassing wider social relationships. PWUDs may achieve stronger bonds, even exceeding those of one's family of origin. In these contexts, traditional family roles of providing and receiving care and support are negotiated amid prevailing stigma and sense of loss over time. Of course, this study had its own set of limitations, and this included some timing considerations given that the interviews were conducted sometime around Christmas, perhaps unconsciously affecting the PWUDs to feel more sentimental about not having to spend their holidays with. Another is my personal involvement in the actual CBDR implementation and facilitation that may have facilitated some biased responses from the participants. Representation is also another limitation given that interviewed PWUDs were only identified from one batch being implemented in just one city. The age and gender of recovering drug users and family members can also be considered in understanding the implicit beliefs linked to their roles in the family. And lastly, alongside developing self-efficacy and self-compassion in the experience of recovery, specific family norms, values, and practices needed to be considered in sustaining the efficacy and impact of programs. So in conclusion, existing CBDR programs have continuously been improving to cater to the evolving needs of Filipino PWUDs and local service providers. Because of these efforts, the Philippines is really slowly emerging to become one more adept in applying CBDR practices vis-a-vis other neighboring Asian countries. Moreover, fine-tuning existing local programs and thinking beyond the minimum requirements to service special populations is very critical. That is, shifting from a one-size-fits-all design into focusing on more individual and group needs supported by stronger case management, monitoring, and evaluation systems. So to my fellow advocates, this is an invitation. We need to revisit and transform the taken for granted meanings and emotionally messy relations of being and becoming a family. It is within this immediate and intimate context that the impact of CBDR programs may be personally felt, embodied, and potentially sustained in the lives of PWUDs. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Have a good day.
Thank you very much, Ms. Triksha, for that presentation. While we acknowledge how family plays a great role in strengthening a person's recovery, some sadly have lost theirs or have lost contact. No? So through the CBDR program, they help individuals strengthen their self-improvement, establish new connections for support, whether it is through our Filipino culture of extended family or even developing a support system within the group that they belong to, coping, and spirituality. Overall, developing a healthier sense of self, learning to take full responsibility for themselves. So thank you again, Ms. Triksha. This brings us to our final presentation for this morning's webinar. Please welcome Ms. Apple Alvarez from the Ateneo de Davao University to give her presentation on diaspora from drug addiction, sobriety, recovery, a meta-synthesis on the experiences of women drug reformists. Ms. Apple?
Good day to everyone. I am Apple Alvarez from the Ateneo de Davao University, and I am delighted to present to everyone my paper about diaspora from drug addiction, sobriety, recovery. Let me begin with the introduction. Worldwide, drug addiction is a major problem. Drug addiction creates a sense of personal autonomy, which is difficult to grasp. That is why an ideal care plan may involve facilitating in a broad array of mutual health groups and supporting abstinence motivation. New findings suggest that drug addiction has no links on gender specificity, meaning the experience highly differs on both gender. Drug addiction has been in the front line of some health programs in most countries, but little has been known on the consequences and effects to the women population. Studies even suggest that women are more likely to turn to these substances as a defensive response to negative feelings or trauma. For women, denial, fear, and shame keep them from looking into their addiction issue. These emotions hinder them from seeking professional help. Recovery rates for drug addiction in women vary significantly since they give different responses to treatment. Women suffer disproportionately and need specialized service. It is important then to empower women to attain sobriety and then recovery. To suffice, women needs more holistic treatment to maintain sobriety, which is gender focus. Efforts to change the lives of these women from addiction to recovery should be supported with research, and despite the contribution of the earlier studies to the precepts of drug addiction, most of the published research has focused more on quantitative methodologies and not on the lens of the women drug reformers. There is also a dearth of literature from third world countries about women drug reformers, particularly in the Philippines. That is why I decided to conduct a meta-synthesis to examine and outline the extent and range of empirical evidence in women experiencing drug abuse. So the purpose of the study is to aim to provide a synthesized data as a groundwork for health professionals, public health workers, and policymakers toward further development of a more inclusive policy to generate strategic recommendation towards knowledge expansion, evidence practice, and well-informed educative process. What about the methods? I have used walls and down meta-synthesis analysis. This integrates results from several different but interrelated qualitative studies. Now, there is six-way process, or this is the framework. That's from number 1, number 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, in which I have undertaken to complete the review. The first is framing a meta-synthesis exercise. That is, identifying the appropriate research question or aim of the meta-synthesis. There were two preliminary questions considered in the literature review. First is, what is the overall view of women's drug reformers and addiction? The second is, what are the lessons learned in these women experiences of diaspora from drug addiction, sobriety, recovery? But then it was reduced to one laser-focused meta-synthesis question, which is, what is the overall view and the lessons learned of women's reformers on drug addiction? The second is locating relevant paper from robust research and checking on all the topic areas rather than a linear search or research. And then deciding what to include, like identifying, comparing the epistemological approaches in each study. And then I have used this one, the electronic database in search streams. Electronic database includes the PubMed, the EBSCOhost, and the ProQuest. And then in the appraisal of studies, I have made sure applying the rigor or appraising studies with a set of a pre-mediated criteria, which includes this. This is the inclusion and the exclusion criteria. So you see type of participants, types, women who are into drug addiction, sobriety, and in recovery process, and the time period from 2000 to June 2018, and it's all qualitative studies. Now I'm showing you the diagram 1, literature search, results, and study selection. A prisma diagram of the article selection process was used, and then here you can see the identification from what studies are included. So from 355 records identified with additional records through other sources, which is 51, and then removing the duplicates, it's 406, and then records excluded out of scope, 303, and then excluded as well that 17, which resulted to only 23 studies, but then it reduced to 6 because there are published outside of the scope of interest, which is 10. It does not meet the type of the article criteria, which is also 6, and one could not obtain full text publication, and again it resulted to the inclusion of 6 studies for meta synthesis. And then the researcher listed down all the details assessed and read the abstract independently, and then together with the expert professor that checked if data extraction was done completely. Dialogue or collaborative dialogue was also done in order to arrive at a consensus or a settlement from a third party. And then the fifth is deciding what to include. So this is where compare and contrast of the studies was conducted. Only 6 studies were included in the final synthesis from Bikitsha, Curley, et al., Kroc, et al., Lozano, Verduzco, et al., Masters and Carlson, Tracy, et al. So this is the Walsham Down essential criteria which I have utilized in appraisal or appraising literature reviews, and this is like the scoring. Now, take a look at this one. This is from 1 to 12. That's the essential criteria, and all of those chosen 6 studies, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it resulted to quality classification of good. And this is how I did. You see there the author, the year, study aims, design, sample characteristics, the method of analysis, themes and results, and this is the quality rating that was done previously, which I have presented earlier. So all of this, you see how it was done, the process of the meta synthesis. So overall, again, it included 6 studies. Now, we proceed to the synthesis of translation. This is like refining the clusters of the metaphors, and I did thematic analysis of the meta synthesis and then clustered it according to themes, which revealed 7 central themes like addiction views up to perspectives on recovery. And the figure 1 shows the summary of the core themes and sub-themes derived from the results of the included literature. Theme 1 are addiction views. Theme 2, drug addiction causes. Theme 3 as the core needs of the women drug reformists. Theme 4 are treatment motivations. Theme 5 recovery barriers. Theme 6 maintenance of sobriety. And Theme 7 perspectives of recovery. So what is in the oblong is the center theme, and then here the rectangle is the sub theme. Now, the theme 1, drug addiction, views has two sub-themes. The first is the tool for coping. The results show that women abuse drugs initially as a tool for coping to painful emotional and psychological experiences. The second women's drug addiction views is that addiction was a result of abusive relationship or situation that break women's connectedness to their families and communities. Theme 2 is drug addiction. Cause. First is the relief of pain. So women try to escape from their difficult situations by attending to all-night parties and take drugs. It was highlighted that women abuse drugs to be relieved of their discomforts or to temporarily cope up with emotional pain. And then male partner influence as well. Their dependence on drug abusing men had long been a reason for their drug addiction, and women were victims of different forms of violence at the hands of men. Childhood abuse, the experience of mistreatment and abuse that originated in a women's childhood, like physical and psychological violence from parents, sexual abuse, violent, and abandonment episodes were common to women abusing drugs. The theme 3, the core needs, includes four sub-themes, which is appropriate treatment. This is the need for a rehabilitation facility for them to recover. And then another core need of women drug reformists is the support group. It is needed to keep women focused and inspired to achieve recovery, like the 12-step groups such as Alcoholic Anonymous or Narcotic Anonymous support system. Freedom from slavery. Women need to feel at the same social level with men. They need to be seen as human beings and not as subhuman and sexual objects. And then another one is spiritual guidance. The need for spiritual activities was a major factor in the healing process of drug reformists. Theme 4, what motivated women to seek for help includes pursuing for them to become a better person, reconnection with their family and their children, empowerment. Women hopes to be understood as autonomous with a sense of belonging and identity, spiritual connection. The observance of quiet time to reflect them help them to decide to seek for help. There are 5 recovery barriers, which includes misperception. Change is difficult and many are in doubt that recovery from addiction can possibly disconnection, the absence of an ideal home where women can stabilize and reconnect after rehabilitation to their families and the community was a barrier to achieving recovery. Non-adaptation. Basically, women have difficulty in adapting to the new environment and set up when admitted in a rehabilitation facility. In theme 6, maintenance of sobriety. Temptation avoidance. From the studies analyzed, sobriety for women was avoiding negative influences and seeking positive ones. Constant monitoring. It was then essential that women are monitored consistently in following the rehabilitation program to stay sober. The final theme, 7, which is perspectives of recovery. It includes positive networks. The results indicated that recovery for women was easier when people in the environment believed they were positive, and that firm rules, when rules were established and imposed firmly in a rehabilitation or any facility where women were rehabilitated, recovery was favorable. Recovery, and this is very important for them. Recovery was also having a positive relationship hence mending relationships. So relationships or mending broken relationships is important in the recovery of women. So these are the review strengths and limitations. And then, in the conclusion, the meta-synthesis emphasized that the unique needs of women in recovery were not considered in the rehabilitation or program offered. So, even those women enrolled in community-based rehabilitation said that it is ineffective. The need for diversity in women's drug addiction treatment is specific to their real needs, and constant monitoring of women's drug reformers were not captured in much of the current research. The process of addiction recovery should direct attention to women's immediate needs. Latest studies in drug addiction says that women continue to use drugs to cope with psychological pain, and men remains to be influential into women's use of drugs. So drug addiction to women is rooted in their childhood traumatic experience. Now, more importantly, reviewed evidence shows that despite of increasing research about addiction, few has examined the perspectives of drug reformers, women, particularly in the Philippines. Hence, there is a need to broaden the focus on study about drug addiction, sobriety, recovery, and so it is important that specialized need for women substance users be developed, not for reasons of discriminating women from men, but for considering their unique and special needs as they regain their personhood. Thank you very much, and
Okay, thank you very much, Miss Apple, and to all our panelists for your presentations. Indeed, women are considered to be one of the special population in recovery and drug use, as they have concerns particularly only women experience. The dynamics on how they develop addiction alongside the roles women play in the family and society are areas wherein we should look into. No? So also programs specifically crafted to address women's needs and concerns. Yan po yung kailangan natin na pagtuunan ng pansin. So again, thank you. Our team is currently gathering all of your questions. Actually, marami na po kaming natanggap. We have a poll. So for those who are attending us in the Zoom live, can you please answer or participate in our polls? We greatly appreciate it. Now let me hand you over to my colleague who will be facilitating today's discussion. Please welcome Ms. Sheila Marquez from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. Hi, Ms. Sheila.
Hi, thank you, Amy. We had a very interesting discussion today, and I thank the presenters for sharing their experience and their expertise to us. And I encourage you to please stay with us as we are moving to another important part of this morning's program, which is the question and answer part. And we have received a lot of questions from our participants. And we apologize in advance if we could not cover everything, but we will try our best to answer those, probably by email. Yeah. Okay, so let me read the first question. The first question is, how can families handle, how can families help and handle a family member who's into recovery if they relapse? Maybe I'll address that question to Junjun.
How will the family members handle?
Yeah, how can they be of help to a family member who's experiencing relapse?
First, if the guy relapse, we presuppose that the guy had already been in treatment. Normally, the the due diligence after being discharged from treatment, there is a relapse agreement. There's an agreement what to do in case of relapse. So during the time that the client is still sober or clean, he himself, sa amin, we ask him, what do you want us to do in case you relapse? Who are you gonna ask for help? Who is authorized to intervene? So those are the things we put in. Kasi pag nag-relapse na and there's no agreement, parang day one for everybody, you know. So everybody's in a panic and everything, you know. So you really just go back to, like, kung walang agreement na gano'n, I think you just go back to how you brought him into treatment the first time around.
Okay.
Whether it's by ambulance, coercion, or you go to that usual family intervention. Some of these are available, some of the resources are available on YouTube, especially the family intervention, how to talk with somebody who is still under the influence, family member, the tough love. I hope that
Thank you,
answers your
Junjun.
question.
Yeah, thank you, Junjun. Anybody from the panel who would like to chime in, add something more? And I acknowledge also the presence of Mr. Cristobal. Maybe you would like to add to what Junjun has just said.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
Sorry, sorry I got cut off. I kind of missed yung kanina, yung
Okay.
ano lang, few minutes ago.
The question was, how do you help a person? How does a family member, or how can families help when a family member experiences relapse? So meaning a person in recovery who relapses, how can a family provide support and help?
Well, I think for me, foremost, what's important is yung education, no, for the family. I think it's important that the family understands. Kasi I can understand it's very difficult for family to help a recovering loved one who goes to relapse if they actually, first, if they don't know what addiction really is. Second is they don't know the strategies on how to handle them. No, so I think I agree with actually most presenters mentioned that, no, that the family has to be educated and get involved. And I think, and with having said that, no, so at least the family would know if they have enabling behaviors na that parang sustains the relapse of the person. At least they what kind of behaviors they have that can trigger or can actually parang enable, no, the addict. So I don't, when I say that, I don't mean it's the family's fault, no, kung mag-relapse sila because the family doesn't know. It's, for me personally, it's not really like that, no? But hindi porket walang alam yung family kaya nag-relapse siya, no? I think it's very careful that we don't have that thought, no? But it would really be a lot helpful if the family knows, no, more of how to handle them. So
okay, thank you so much, Mr. Cristobal. Another interesting question: how do we help, or how do we intervene? How do we help, or how do we intervene with people who uses drugs and experiences discrimination? Discrimination in trying to access treatment. Can we hear from Ms. Karen, please?
Hi, Sheila. Thank you for picking me. Look, it's a bit difficult to answer how do you intervene when a person has been experiencing discrimination. I can rather say what services or what approach people should be having in terms of dealing with people who use drugs. I mean, it's also really interesting for us to take a little bit of a reflection approach when we're talking about people, right? People as individuals. A lot of the time, there's a sense or a practice where we are doing this othering through using our language. Oh, the people who use drugs. Oh, those people, the addicts. The drug dependents, the surrenderies. We're talking here really about individuals. We're talking about human beings, and the thing again. I like to talk about this to do this type of self-reflection. How am I referring to other people? Okay, so that they happen to be using drugs is one component that we need to take into consideration. But this stigmatizing and this discrimination, it really comes down to a personal level. How we're referring to individuals. A lot of the time we're referring to people as a third party, those drug users, those people over there. These are people in our community. These are friends. These are family members. These are people that are part of, like I was mentioning in my presentation, that system, right? So again, it's difficult to say what should we do if a person is just receiving, sort of experiencing discrimination. A person should leave and find services that are friendly towards them, right? And this again is if we're looking at this from a systems perspective and as healthcare professionals or as people that are offering the services to the client, the person that we are talking about, needs to want to come and access your services. So they need to feel welcome there. And if they are experiencing discrimination or if they are experiencing some type of stigma, they're not going to return. It's simple. It happens in every service delivery model you're talking about. So the end goal, right, is healthy, safe, happy individuals. And for us to be able to do that, we need people to want to come to our services and to be able to offer those services that are welcoming to them. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Karen. Okay, another question. This is more in the context of the Philippines. Only if we know how much or how huge is the relapse rate in the Philippines? Do we have any data? Does anybody know? Ms. Nolly, do we have a data or Ms. Triksha? Okay. Probably this is something that needs to be
For
looked at.
research, yes.
Yeah, another research topic. Okay.
Shella?
Yes,
Yes,
Ms.
I
Nolly.
think the DOH has data on that based on their TRC clients only. Yeah, but it
Okay.
is very limited and of course small portion of the population.
Yala, yeah.
Right. Yes, Reggie.
Yeah, no, may I just add from the other question that Miss Karen answered?
Yeah, please.
No, I just wanted, no, I totally agree with Karen. I also noticed this, one of the dilemmas of talking about community-based program. One of the dilemmas why people don't want to join the CBRP, it's because of that they will be labeled addicts. And I agree with Karen. I think it's about time that we need to start being careful with the terminologies we use. For example, you don't go to the hospital
Right.
and the staff says, "Oh, ayan na si HIV, oh, ayan na si cancer." Diba? Or ayan, there go, ito, this patient is diabetic na. Oh, diba? How
Or
come
with
when it
COVID.
comes to addict? Yeah, si COVID, ayan na si COVID. How come when it comes to addiction treatment, staff labels, addict to, dito alcoholic to. So why don't we just call them by their first name or their family names, diba?
Yes,
So
yes.
right there and there you will see the stigma that sometimes, and I admit, sometimes I'm also guilty of that. So it's important na we have to be careful of the labeling and of using these terminologies very carefully, because these are the things why people don't want to be associated with treatment. And right now, what we need is to motivate people to seek help and to seek treatment. No? And if I'll be labeled as such, then I'll be very careful, or I won't join na lang. Kasi wow, pag nakitang nag-group therapy, ay mga addict yan, di ba? I mean, in the hospital, you don't say, oh, mga cancer yan, yung mga yan, cancer.
Yeah,
diba?
yeah.
No.
Thank you, Sir Richie.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also understand, no, it's incumbent, or it's parang it's innate for every individual to have our own biases. But I think what's important is we have to be cautious. We have to, look at people as our brothers, sisters, with feelings. Yeah. Okay, sorry for chiming in. Okay, so there's another comment and question actually that's addressed to DSWD. So Miss Nolly, the idea of a non-judgmental approach is really nice and sound very DSWD. But how do we deal or encourage other national counterparts and local agencies in the government not to be judgmental to the point of criminalizing drug use?
Thank you very much for that very wonderful question, no? Parang pang Miss Universe, no? But that is really a challenge also for the SWD, because as you know, the SWD is like the caring agency of the Philippine government. What we normally do is, for example, the SWD is the co-lead in the interagency, ICAD, no? We call it a cluster of non-government, of national government agencies, and we are trying to influence, advocate, and as much as possible, we are actually telling them the voices from the field, no? Kasi a lot of our observation is that many things that are happening at the community level are not actually reaching the national government agencies. So what we do is we inform them and we advocate with other national government agencies what is actually happening in the field. So we are like voices in the of what is happening at the community level. And really, language matters, no? I would like to agree that the conscientization part, or the sensitizing our local government counterparts, service providers, those at the grassroots level, especially in the barangay and even at the, actually, all levels naman po talaga, we need to do a lot of information dissemination and conscientizing our counterparts. And I believe it will really take so much time pa. No, and I wish this webinars like this will be translated in a more parang grassroots level din, no? Kasi ang ganda, the researches are very informative, and I believe that the rich data should be shared also to a lot of at various levels, no? But more specifically, I think at the local government talaga, wherein the action is happening, wherein the interventions are being provided, wherein the reaching out is happening to the PWUDs.
Yeah, on that note, there's a follow-up question actually. Sabi niya, is Yakap Bayan a nationwide program? And then, if yes, how DSWD encourage LGUs to implement the program, because some LGUs are not, those LGUs who are not interested.
Agree. Yes, no, we consider Yakap Bayan program as a nationwide program. In fact, DDB Resolution number 18 was issued and adopted Yakap Bayan program as a model aftercare and reintegration program in the country. So through our field offices, the SWD field offices nationwide, They are conducting series of marketing activities to inform our local government units about the framework, about the program, and we as a national government agency, we are partnering with DILG. Actually, we are in close coordination with the Department of Interior and Local Government through the Office of USEC Echeverry, and we are like tandem, no, in popularizing the Yakap Bayan program. And rest assured that our field offices are being trained on how to run the Yakap Bayan program in order for them to teach our local government as well. And we're trying to automate the systems, no? We develop multidimensional assessment tools to aid the case management of our PWUDs. And our ICT office is actually finalizing the information system. We want to equip local government units and we want to make their work easy. So we're doing a lot of things, and hopefully through this webinar, we will also be able to inform and reach out to a lot of local government units as well.
Right, right. Thank you, Miss Nolly. As you said in your presentation, whole of the LGU approach and whole of the nation approach. Salamat. Okay, so another big question. Our biggest challenge today is we have limited mobility due to the lockdown quarantine. Treatment and rehabilitation sessions are in some areas are temporarily stopped or challenged. So given the current situation, what's your suggestion on how do we keep things moving, thus avoiding relapse among PWUDs? Anybody who would like to answer? Maybe Therese, would you like to respond to that question?
Sure. Hi, Stella. Thank you. I think it is a very complex question, but something that all of us could definitely relate to. I mean, even our day-to-day for all of us is different. But I guess maybe how I can answer it is to share how the recent outreach and drop-in centers supported by the Colombo Plan are doing recently in the Philippines, where it is a mix of the strategies now where we use the virtual tools, but at the same time, we reduce the volume, the centers reduce the volume of the clients that they cater to. So of course, it also does not sound as simple as that because like every day the situation changes. So there are also situations where even internet itself makes it difficult to reach others, and therefore teams would have to work with various creative strategies like even call and text. No? So like also in the Philippines, kasi hindi yung internet hindi siya great in all areas. No? So one of the things that they shared with us that they utilize is that call and text, reaching out on the clients for follow-up, or are they showing up, or just checking in on them with those very simple tools that are available to us. So so far, well, yeah, I think it is definitely extremely challenging, but at the same time, I think this is where that community aspect comes in, where we work well with the people in the community and then the people around them as well, who can provide resources or give assistance on how to reach people and kind of make follow-ups to each other in the various work, advocacy, providing screening, brief intervention, and all of those activities that we normally do on a face-to-face. And I think let's face it, most of the formats that we use in the Philippines is still in the face-to-face. So it's also that opportunity where we see how we make use of the other tools within the program activities. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Delis. It's a little bit a slow process to, pero it's worth it to look at
Yes.
technology to advance our services. Yeah, Junjun, please.
Yeah, I wanna. I know several. I've been working with several local governments, and sige lang, tuloy lang yung. We just continue with the work, no? Like I think with Angeles, and now I'm working also with Agoo. So the regular, you just have to do the protocols, no? The testing, make sure the workers are also don't go out or quarantine together with the inpatient clients. So it's possible. We just move on. And then I've been training the UTC for the past year. I've done about 8 UTC trainings since the quarantine started. And what works, of course, definitely live face to face is much better. No? But we blend. The online is really stressful. But what really worked for us was combining live participants and having online people at the same time. No? So the live participants limited syempre, and then but of course they're screened and tested. No? So right now we have availability of test kits. You have test kits. You can get the results in 5 minutes. So it's possible to have the diligence and the prudence to continue with the business of recovery. Because addiction doesn't stop because there's a pandemic. No, we know that suicide, the use of alcohol has increased. Also, right now, I've experienced a lot more issues with gambling. I don't have any more meth based clients on meth alone. It's all gamblers. So why is that? Because probably the addiction has shifted to process addictions, the internet and gambling. It's much more accessible than the other drugs, no? So we have to continue with the recovery stuff, the treatment, and just be creative. Think out of the box to overcome the challenges.
Right, right. Thank you, Junjun. And it's very, really important to get updated with, you know, yung mga announcement, rules that's being provided by the Department of Health regarding infection prevention and control. Okay, another question on discrimination. Is there any
Sheila.
legal, sorry? Somebody's,
Sheila, can I ask?
Apple.
Yes,
oh,
ma'am.
Miss Apple. Yes, please.
Ma'am.
Go on. Your line is a little bit breaking
Yes, ma'am.
up.
I'd like to add about
Okay, please.
relapse prevention. Yes, ma'am. I'd like to add about relapse prevention, ma'am. I think the drug hotline could also help. That is to reach drug reformists. So in the Ateneo, we also have the community-based rehabilitation, and then we also have at the same time the drug hotline that is run by nurses in Ateneo. So they are trained to answer calls and then intervene with the issues that is peer reforms through calls. So with that, the drug hotline is helping this drug reform, even to call us and we may help them with regard to how they feel right now with relapse and etc. So it's very much helping mom the drug reforms in Davao City. And it has started in 2017 and up to now it is still serving even callers from Manila, even reaching from Pampanga, not specifically only from Davao City.
Right.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you. Thank you, Miss Apple,
May
for
I add
sharing
some-
that information.
may I add something to the
Yeah,
relapse?
okay.
Yeah,
Briefly, okay.
on the
Sige.
relapse, no? For the relapse prevention, people with co-occurring disorders are more prone to relapse. I've noticed that the people who are multiple relapse, they're usually the anti-personality disorders, antisocial personality disorders, the bipolars, people with bipolars. So if you can screen for them as early as possible, especially during treatment, and provide them with the necessary. The treatment of the addiction is something else. The treatment of the co-occurring would be something else. And if they provide with the tools as early as possible, then the relapse will most likely happen. The important thing is what they can do when they're in the relapse and how they can come back. Relapse is a reality of the continuum of recovery. So
Right.
what's important is we educate our clients. And of
Mhm.
course, one of the major obstacles also of relapse is the toxic shame, no? Especially
Mhm.
for those who are so mayabang, "Ante, sober na ako, I'm so ano." And then pag
Mhm.
nag-relapse, oops, they don't want to
Mhm.
go to day one.
Yes, yes.
So,
Thank you, Junjun. And that was also highlighted in several of the presentations, that relapse is part of the recovery process. And Miss Apple, thank you for sharing about the hotline or helpline, because I know the Department of Health also launched this kind of concept. So yeah. Okay, so maybe I'll take one or two more questions and then we'll wrap up. Sige, I think this one is a very important question about discrimination again. Is there any legal or criminal liability to anyone who discriminates people who use drugs? I'm just curious, sabi niya, can we consider this to gross negligence if they just let it happen, if the probability is higher? Anybody in the group would like to answer that? Meron bang legal or criminal liability that you know of? Or should we have this kind of framework?
there should be, you know.
By
I
ethics,
think
there should be.
there's no
Okay.
laws for being a good person. I think that's this is something that we have to deal with in our lives.
Yeah, there's no.
Um, it becomes a criminal liability when a person is denied access to healthcare services, and I think that becomes, that's a little bit more complicated. Um, we've considered, it is known that drug dependence is a chronic health disorder, right? By the way, I think there's a lot of confusion in some of the questions as well around the difference between drug use and drug dependence. A person who uses drugs might not need any intervention. So we are speaking a lot about, people identified as people who use drugs. That's by the by. That's beside the point. A person who uses drugs might not need to access health services. Once a person of any shape, form, any nationality, any gender comes forward and says, look, I have a concern that I need health services for, right? Whether the person is a drug user, whether the person is considered any of the other marginalized groups of society, and that person is asking for assistance from the healthcare system or from government services, and they are denied access to those health services, then we have, then there's a concerns around legal and ethical standards around being able to access and being able to offer those provisions of healthcare for that individual. Okay. But again, that just goes back to there's no laws that teach a person how to be a decent human being. We have to learn that in our families and in our communities. So just be kind to each other. I think that's the first way to start. But again, if a person is denied access on the basis that they have a drug problem or they are considered a criminal in the eyes of somebody else, then this is problematic for a person accessing treatment or other health services.
And I think, Karen, it's important that we understand the spectrum of, care. So that comes in the prevention approach, like teaching pro-social skills, life skills, things like that. Yeah. But of course, not particularly discussing that you shouldn't be behaving this.
Yeah.
So, okay. Last question. I apologize for the other questions, but in the interest of time, we can only entertain one more question and then we'll wrap up today's session. So what do you recommend? What can you recommend to people who use drugs, who is those who are probably already facing harm or problems, no? What do you recommend to those who are in denial and separating themselves from their families? So I suppose due to drug use issues.
Separating from themselves from their families.
Yeah, they start to separate themselves, I assume, from their families because they already feeling
Yeah.
issues or problems.
Feeling issues. Okay. Well, from what I've learned from our trainer, Dr. Igor, we go to motivational interviewing. So we bring them from pre-contemplation to contemplation. But of course, here in the Philippines, things are easier. We just have them. You can call on the police to do a rescue or the ambulance to bring them to back, para matauhan, So many techniques for that particular intervention. One is the family intervention that really works well. Then the motivational interviewing that also works. And if worse comes to worse, we also have Pakang. Oh, that's it. So, but if you need, there's Rechi, you can, if you need help with that, we have sessions for that. We can provide 2 to 3 sessions on coaching, family coaching, on how to do the intervention. You can get in touch with me or Rechi also does that. So, and I think Therese. So it's not hard, but it's easy. It's doable.
Okay. Okay, Rechi, please.
I agree with Junjun. And I think what people also should understand na, PWUDs, some are in denial. It doesn't mean that they really don't know what's happening. I think contrary to what some people believe na, there are a lot of actually PWUDs who are, they are in denial, but they actually know what they're doing. So it's just really a matter of understanding na, first of all, maybe they're not motivated yet or they're not ready. So that means na we don't stop there, but like what Junjun was saying, then we need to know how to motivate them to start seeking for help and accepting their problem. So I think that's very important. And addressing the family, actually one of the reasons I observed, one of the reasons why PWUDs avoid their family, it's not because they don't like to be with the family, it's because they are ashamed of what's happening to them, or they're angry with their family. I think it's very important to be able to understand that. Na it's not that they don't want. In fact, we've seen this in treatment. The moment, so that's why we need to address family issues so they can so they can reintegrate again with each other. So importante yung factors na yun. I think for me that's very important, especially those who will provide treatment and those who are actually handling PWUDs. Yeah.
Thank you.
Shall I add also something, since Rechi mentioned family? Family could also have been the number one stressor why the guy went into drugs in the first place. And it's like having one thing we do with trauma, we don't let the abuser face the person who's been abused. And I've had many clients where the abusers were family members. So folk treatment is focused on internal locus. We focus on the individual and equipping. You can change the family. If they ever change, that's a real bonus. But we strengthen the individual coping. You can't change them, but you can change yourself, empower. So that's why we go client-driven. I know they'll make mistakes, they'll screw up, but in the end, they'll get it sooner. Maybe longer than most. Some will get it sooner than later.
And there's a comment actually in the chat box saying that sometimes they're just incapable of bringing themselves to help. So that's where we come in as service providers to assist them, how to have a voice and access services. Okay, so I know this has been a very interesting discussion. Yes, I'm coming to that point. I'm acknowledging Olivier, and he would like to say something. Yes, sir, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Sheila. I just wanted to kind of rebound on one important point that was raised by Karen, Fritz, many of the speakers, but to try to unfold it a little bit. I think we should try to avoid that our discussion about the recovery industry in a way, meaning we have an industry aiming at placing services to clients. of course, we are discussing about systems, national, local, government, non-government, etc. But the trap, I feel, is to be in a business that is about fixing them. Fixing meaning providing services. Well, what services are we providing? Are the services needed by the people? As it was said, if the services are not fitting the need, if they are service provider oriented, the people just won't come, right? That's one point. And two, them being the addicts, the etc., the people who are stigmatized. So I think even McDonald's or whatever capitalistic industry, what they do is they do client groups, right? They get the definition of the product that will be needed by the beneficiaries, by the clients, right? And as much as we can do research, design, etc., if we don't get the opinion of the very beneficiaries, meaning the recovered, but also the current drug users, I think we fail, right? So this represents a challenge, of course, because drug use is illegal. But if we don't get their views on the very design of what we do, we won't reach them properly. And the second point is even a capitalistic industry, what Starbucks, they do commercial, they do promotion. So if we want to contribute to reducing the stigmatization about the people who use drugs, we need to communicate about that somehow. When I say we, I don't know who in our group, right? But if there is not an effort to try to rectify a little bit the idea, as it was said, people who use drugs are your brother, your sister, your mother, your best friend, right? So if we don't contribute to try to change a little bit that image, they will be stigmatized and they will be in a way pushed away from what we want. Our product is health-seeking behavior, right? Beyond whatever, relapse prevention, right? What we need is a move from the person to get support. So that's just what I wanted to highlight. Thank you. Over.
Thank you, Olivier, for that. Interesting points that you made. Okay, one of the participants said, "I hope we have more time for discussion." So it seems this is really a very interesting, topic to discuss, and maybe a call for another meeting or another set of discussion. So just to wrap up, no. I won't repeat what you all have said. I think this Q&A portion has really wrapped up what is the essence of this webinar. But I think what I want to highlight is that with all the presentations that you made, the importance of humanity's need for connection. That's the very essence that I have picked up actually from all your presentations. It could also be a therapeutic. There's a therapeutic value to being connected, with your family, with your community, with your service providers. So I'd like to thank all of you for staying with us. There are still 407 in the Zoom platform, and there are more in the Facebook Live, and there are people who joined us also in the other online platform. So some announcements. I think the evaluation forms are already posted in the chat box. So please access the evaluation form and complete it, because this will be the basis for your e-certificates. And for those who have not received their e-certificates from previous webinars, just please bear with us, because there are just tons of people, who joined us, and the technical team are actually working on it. And I'd like to congratulate, by the way, the technical people behind this webinar. You know, it's such a production, I tell you. So it's a hard work. So congratulations to everybody who's working behind this. And we'd like to invite you also for another webinar on May 12th, same time, from 9 a.m. to 12 noon. And to get more information, please follow the Asian Center for Drug Policy Facebook page. And they are also on YouTube. So magandang hapon, everyone, and have a
Good
sumptuous
lunch.
lunch. Yeah, and please be safe, okay? See you again soon.